That's good. Okay, got the live stream started. We have a wonderful sutta today from the Majjhima Nikaya, number 44. It's the discourse where Dhammadinnā, the bhikkhunī, answers questions. And we'll go into who that is and who's asking when we look at the sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sangham Namasami. So I will share the screen. Let's see here. Why don't I? Oh, I bet it's this one. We're gonna try. And that's Can you tell me, are you seeing just the sutta? Are you also seeing my email behind it, or what is it?
I can see the sutta, and then at the top I can see like the upper tabs, like the YouTube. Yeah, that's the YouTube.
Okay, so then now we just, excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, so this is Majjhima Nikaya 44. And I'm going to make the font a little bigger for me to be able to read it. And it's called the shorter classification, which you can assume then that it is a longer classification, which is Majjhima number 43, also a very worthwhile sutta. I picked this one though because it kind of fit with the first part of fits with the theme we had last week about the cessation of suffering. And then I just decided it was such a rich sutta to do it in full, or at least as far as we can get. Just kind of a thing for the practice too, isn't it? We'll do it in full, or at least as far as we can get. And the summary of the sutta is that there's this layman, Visākha, and he comes to the bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā and asks about various difficult matters, including some of the highest meditation attainments. And we'll get into that. And the Buddha fully endorses her answers. So let's go right into the text, and then we'll have some comments. And please feel free to ask questions, make comments. If there's anything that's resonating for you or needs clarification, we can do our best to address that. So the text says, "So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrels' feeding ground. Then the layman Visākha went to see the bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā, bowed down, sat to one side, and said to her," and we'll get to what she says. I just want to note that Dhammadinnā was recognized as the foremost bhikkhunī in teaching. And you can see the foremost bhikkhunis and bhikkhus and lay people in the Anguttara Nikaya in the ones. And this is presumably on the basis of this sutta, as there's really not a lot of materials from her, which, kind of makes me a little bit sad. There probably was a lot more teachings out there, but at least we have this one, and it is a superb example of beautiful teaching. So this is what Visākha says. "Ma'am, they speak of this thing called substantial reality. What is this substantial reality that the Buddha spoke of?" And I'm going to that's Bhante Sujato's translation, and I've made some edits in his translation because for words that work better for me, but I'm going to give you a set that you can pick from and make your own substitutions if you don't like the one that I make. So the comment is that substantial reality is Sakkaya, from Sat, real, and Kaya, substance. So this is why he chose to translate it this way. The commentaries define Sakkaya as the three planes of cyclic existence, i.e., all that exists. Thus, Sakkaya is the substantial reality that is mistakenly assumed to be a self. So that was Bhante's comment from Sutta Central. Most of the comments in here are my own. I've labeled when they're not. So that, yeah, there's a real basis for why he chose that translation. This doesn't quite fit on the screen, but I took the definition from the Digital Pali Dictionary. Sakkaya, it's personal existence, individual identity, mind-body complex, embodiment, embodied beings. View that one is the owner of the body and mind, literally existing body. So it's really about, as we saw up above here, mistakenly assuming it to be a self. And here are some other translations. Substantial reality was Sujata Bhikkhu. Embodiment is Ananda Jodi Bhikkhu. Self-identity is Sudasu Bhikkhu. I.B. Horner says own body, and Tanisaro Bhikkhu says self-identification. I think I chose to substitute throughout the rest of it as self-identification. So, and you can see I put it in brackets so that you know that I'm putting in a substitute for what Bhante Sujato had in there. And self-identification just brings out that quality of what is it that we're confusing directly, whereas the substantial reality gets a little bit too heady for me. Thus the choice that I made. Okay, we'll continue with the text here a little bit. Visākha. The Buddha said that these 5 grasping aggregates are self-identification. That is, the grasping aggregates of form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. The Buddha said that these 5 grasping aggregates are self-identification, saying, "Good, ma'am," Visākha approved and agreed with what Dhammadinnā said. And then he asked another question, but we'll go into a sidebar again. Fortunately, I guess I have to make the text smaller to get that to fit. Fit? Let's see. No, that doesn't do it. Sorry, technical. I guess this just doesn't. There we go. Okay, so this is from the Dictionary of Pali Proper Names, and it's a wonderful source that you can go and find out some more about the backstories, about the people that you find in the canon, and I'm really glad that it's now available online. So here it says that Dhammadinnā was an eminent Teri, so bhikkhunī, ranked foremost among the bhikkhunis who possessed the gift of preaching. She was the wife of Visākha of Rajagaha, and that's who's asking the questions. And when he, having heard the Buddha preach, became an anagami, she left the world with the consent of her husband, who sent her to the monastery in a golden palanquin. Another commentary says that was provided by King Bimbisara. And then dwelling in solitude, she soon attained arahantship with the 4 patisambhida. And that word is probably not a familiar one. That's the analytic insights, the knowledges. She later returned to Rajagaha to worship the Buddha. So she went really back because the Buddha was there and she wanted to pay respects. And there, Visākha asked her questions on the Dhamma, which she answered as easily as one might cut a low stalk with a knife. The questions and answers are given in the Cūḷavedallasutta, which is what we're looking at. Visākha reported this interview to the Buddha, who praised her great wisdom and commended her eloquence. So here I've added some of the Pali so that you can see some of the some questions that often come up about how do we address people? How do you address a bhikkhunī or a bhikkhu or a layperson? So here you can see in the text, Visākha, the Buddha said these 5 grasping aggregates are self-identification. And Bhante Sujata has chosen to kind of leave this word out, avuso. So every time, if you look at the Pali, almost every sentence, you'll see avuso, avuso, avuso. And that's the way that Dhammadinnā is addressing Visākha. So I've actually reinserted them back into the text so that we can see this way that they're communicating with each other. And avuso, did I put down? Yeah, here it is. It's a contracted form of ayasmanto, which is really friend. So it's a form of address. The bhikkhus often use it more than the bhikkhunis, but there's some bhikkhunis who are adopting it as well. It's a polite address, and it means friend. With the bhikkhus, it would be brother. It also has the venerable, so it's got these qualities of like a good quality friend. And this is generally used by an elder to a junior or someone in your peer group. So here we have what was husband and wife. And so the terms of respect that would be appropriate for that relationship would be, as you can imagine, very different than that of a layman and a bhikkhunī, or a lay woman or layman and a bhikkhu. And so that she's addressing her former husband basically as friend, and putting in a relationship of she's the one now in robes, and he doesn't yet know that she's an arahant. He's asking these questions. The speculation is partly to test her, to see, hey, why'd you come back? Are you washing out a monastic life? He wants to encourage her to go back. That's what some of the commentaries say. And I think that's a wonderful, loving thing to do. He's in for a wonderful surprise that she's actually really, really attained the purpose of going into robes. So throughout, further down, I'm going to add the word avuso back in. And then you can see he translated, saying, good, ma'am. Visākha approved and agreed. And ma'am, is the translation he's using for aya, or aye is the vocative version. So I'm going to just put that back in as aya, or aye in the vocative. People often ask, well, what do we call you? And people say, oh, I hear you call each other aye instead of aya. And why is that? And that's just the way that the Pali language is structured. When you're speaking to someone, you use what's called the vocative, the vocative form of it. And so that ending is ia. And notice that the word aya is actually a masculine word, and it can mean gentleman or lord or master, noble. And then to feminize it, they make that a long A. So when you hear I, you wouldn't call a bhikkhu, you could call a bhikkhu aya, but not you wouldn't use vocative aye, you would use aya. It's that's the nature of the language if you're using the gender basis on these. So yeah, often this comes up. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'll make this available so you can read them further for clarification. And then you can just see that the way that they're naming things. So Visākha, this is from that sentence up here. Visākha upasako Dhammadinnā bhikkhunīya. Visākha, that's the nominative, the naming form of his name. Upasaka, that's saying he's a lay devotee, a lay follower of the Buddha. Dhammadinnā, that's the instrumental form of the name. So she's the one who's the instrument of giving the Dhamma. And bhikkhunī is the instrumental form of bhikkhunī. So Basitang, she spoke. Okay, that's our Pali lesson for the day. Don't worry, we're not going to do the whole sutta that way. So as I said, in the text, I'm going to put the IA back in and the avuso. So here we are. And I'm going to have to make the font bigger again. IA. They speak of this thing called the origin of self-identification. What is the origin of self-identification that the Buddha spoke of? Avuso. It's the craving that leads to future lives, mixed up with relishing and greed, taking pleasure wherever it lands. That is craving for sensual pleasures, craving to continue existence, and craving to end existence. The Buddha said that this is the origin of self-identification. So we're really getting right into it, that it's the craving that leads us to all the woes. Last week we were talking about suffering. Where does it come from? Here it is, craving. So he continues, IA. They speak of this thing called the cessation of self-identification. What is the cessation of self-identification that the Buddha spoke of? Avuso is the fading away and cessation of that very same craving with nothing left over, giving it away, letting it go, releasing it, and not clinging to it. The Buddha said that this is the cessation of self-identification. And that was the sentence we focused on last week. IA, they speak of the practice that leads to the cessation of self-identification. What is the practice that leads to the cessation of self-identification that the Buddha spoke of? Avuso, the practice that leads to the cessation of self-identification that the Buddha spoke of is simply this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. And I'm not going to spend any time really today on the Eightfold Path unless there's some question that comes up for you, because we'll have many suttas we've done and would do in future that will do more depth for that. So, but notice that what we see here in this is essentially the formula for the Four Noble Truths. We've got some disease, and there's a cause for this disease. The cause can be removed, and there's a treatment to achieve the removal. This was a common format for the medical profession at the time of the Buddha. So here we are with the disease of self-identification. And Visākha frames the questions right in alignment with this, because he's seen the Four Noble Truths himself. And so now he's quizzing his former wife, bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā, about this. And she replies, very straightforward, that it all comes back down to the Eightfold Path. Then it gets interesting, the way that he twists and turns the questions around to just kind of, I imagine this is kind of like a PhD defending your dissertation, the questions. But IA, is that grasping the exact same thing as the 5 grasping aggregates? Or is grasping one thing and the 5 grasping aggregates another? Avuso, the grasping is not the exact same thing as the 5 grasping aggregates, nor is grasping one thing and the 5 grasping aggregates another. The desire and greed for the 5 grasping aggregates is the grasping there. So why would this be that, just to think of it, if you've got the aggregates, our body and our mental qualities, if they're the same thing as the grasping, we're kind of in trouble that It's like this package is glued together. And so her reply is that it's you need the aggregates to have that grasping going on, but the aggregates themselves are not the grasping. Arahants still have aggregates, but they don't have grasping. So there is a way to get to that state of having aggregates, but not having grasping. We have hope. But IA, how does substantialist view come about? And here the Pali is Katang Panyaya Sakaya Diti Hotiti. And you may have heard that term Sakaya Diti before. It's one of the things that falls away with noble attainment. And what it is this view concerning one or all of the aggregates being the identification of a self, or that the self is in those or of them, or I possess aggregates. So it's that construction of a self view. And she'll go into that here. Avuso. It's when an unlearned, ordinary person has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've not seen true persons and are neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the true persons. And true persons here, they're talking about someone with noble attainment. They regard form as self, self as having form, form in self, or self in form. And the same for feeling, perception, choices, consciousness as self, self having consciousness, consciousness in self, or self in consciousness. That's how substantialist view comes about. And again, we'll probably have many suttas that go into this and piece it apart. But what this sutta is doing is just kind of running through the catechism in a very interesting way to see, what does Dhammadinnā know, and is it coming from her practice, or is it just reciting? I think it becomes really clear that this is from her knowledge. But IA, how does substantialist view not come about? As you can imagine, it's the opposite. Avuso, it's when a learned noble disciple has seen the noble ones and is skilled and trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've seen true persons and are skilled and trained in the teaching of the true persons. They don't regard form as self, self as having form, form in self, or self in form. And then it's the same for the other aggregates up to consciousness, that they're not attaching or seeing themselves in those. And it takes a little, it can seem like it's a turn here, but he's really going through that, the Noble Truths again, and he's asking about, okay, you said there was a path to this. So he says, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? Avuso, it is simply this Noble Eightfold Path, that is, and then she lists them, right? View, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and immersion, samadhi. But, and this is the crux where he's really bringing it in to say, tell me more about this. But IA, is the Noble Eightfold Path conditioned or unconditioned? Now, this is a big question. It's a philosophical question, but it also has a lot of matter in our practice itself. So if the world is conditioned, can we travel in a conditioned path to get to the unconditioned? Or can there even be an unconditioned path? What would that be? When I was trying to think that through, it's almost like then it has to almost be by chance or predestination. And that's not really, that would be not the teaching of Kama. It wouldn't fit into the systems that we're learning and experiencing. So her reply is, the Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned. And we are able to cultivate a conditioned path. We're putting the conditions in to reach the unconditioned. That's essentially what the Eightfold Path is. Do you want to make a comment?
It just comes to mind the Buddhist teaching on the raft.
Oh,
and
yes.
Constructing, we have to construct this raft, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is in a number of suttas, this simile is brought up. So we create our own raft based on materials that we've gathered from the teachings, from what we've learned from the suttas and other, and so we utilize that raft to cross the stream, to forge the stream, and then when we're on the other side, then we just leave the raft on the shore and walk on. So it is conditioned. It is something we create based on our own practice, but also on the teachings.
That's a good one to, and it's exactly what the raft analogy is about. It's a conditioned thing, and then there's in the raft simile, it's and then you don't carry the raft on your head.
Right.
You've reached the unconditioned, or the far shore, it's called. Okay, thank you.
Cross the floods.
Cross the floods.
Yeah, to cross the floods.
Yeah. Are we living in any floods now? Yeah. All right. So the next question. IA. Are the three spectrums of practice included in the Noble Eightfold Path, or is the Noble Eightfold Path included in the three practice categories? And at first, I was like, what are the spectrums? But what we're talking about here are the three ways that we parse out the Eightfold Path into sila, ethical conduct, bhavana, conditions to cultivate towards samadhi, and panya, wisdom. So those are the three spectrums that are being asked about here. And her answer, avuso. The three spectrums of practice are not included in the Noble Eightfold Path. Rather, the Noble Eightfold Path is included in the three practice categories. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These things are included in the spectrum of ethics. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion, samadhi. These things are included in the spectrum of samadhi, immersion. Right view and right thought. These things are included in the spectrum of wisdom. So there are things in ethics or in these other, in wisdom, and that are, it's a sphere that has more in it, but the Eightfold Path has these things that apply to those areas. And then he hones in on the last of the path factors. So for immersion, samadhi. But IA, what is immersion? What things are the basis of immersion? What things are the prerequisite for immersion? What is the development of immersion? Avuso, unification of the mind is immersion. The four kinds of mindfulness meditation are the basis for immersion. The four right efforts are the prerequisites for immersion. The cultivation, development, and making much of these very same things is the development of immersion. I don't know if you can see that I can't contain the smile on my face. This is just the crux of it. It's so beautiful and it's so easily put, and then we can really put our practice together based on this paragraph. So I've got it here in Pali. Yako avuso visākha chitasa ekagata ayam samadhi. And you may have heard that word, ekagata. So that's one of the jhana factors, and it's the collectedness of the mind. And then Chattaro Satipatthana Samadhi Nimitta. So Satipatthana, another word that you've probably heard. So we go into the foundations of mind, the basis of mindfulness. So this is our sati, our mindfulness. And then the last one, Chattaro Samappadana, Samadhi Parikara. Parikara, that's requisites. What is it that, what are the requisites for the monastic? We've got the 4 requisites of, robes, shelter, food, and medicine. So this is saying, what are the requisites needed for samadhi? And it's really, really important. It's right effort. So what we're doing with our right effort, when we're looking at what's arisen that is unwholesome and needs to be cut off, or what do we not want to grow more of? What is growing and it's wholesome, so we want to grow more and we want it to come to fruition. What seeds do we need to plant so that we're growing what's wholesome? This will be conducive for our samadhi. And the satipatthana and the right effort, these are things that are all the time practice. This is not I'm going to spend a half hour on the cushion practice. This is all the time practice. And when we're doing it as an all the time practice, when you get to that cushion, the ekaggata, that collectedness of mind, comes much more easily, much, much, much more easily. So this paragraph, and then that the cultivation, development, and making much of. So what's what I'm doing right now? I'm making much of these very same things as the development of immersion. So it's not just go to the cushion and pucker your brow up, and it's not that at all. It's the happiness of cultivating the wholesome in right effort. It's the clear seeing that comes with the satipatthana practice. And then it's a continual focus towards collectedness. Okay, so now we'll continue. IA, how many processes are there? Avuso, there are these 3 processes: physical, verbal, and mental processes. We could take this sutta and then spin it out into, I don't know, probably a year's worth of suttas to analyze each of these questions. Physical, verbal, and mental processes. But IA, what is the physical process? What's the verbal process? And what's the mental process? Avuso, breathing is a physical process. Placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes. Perception and feeling are mental processes. But IA, why is breathing a physical process? Why are placing the mind and keeping it connected verbal processes? And why are perception and feelings mental processes? You might think, well, some of these questions are a little mundane, but it helps to fill out the full pattern if you really do ask all of the questions. Avuso, breathing is physical. It's tied up with the body. That's why breathing is a physical process. First, you place your mind and keep it connected. Then you break into speech. That's why placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes. So this is one that's interesting because the speech you break out into may be entirely in your head. On the cushion, I would say most meditators have verbal going on, even though their mouths are not moving. It's my case too. Do you have a comment?
So the process he translates sankhara, I believe. Is it? It's sankhara.
I
think it's sankhara. The kaya sankhara, vachi sankhara,
that,
and the chitta sankhara, I believe.
It's a great question, and I think it's worth looking up. Let's see.
Sometimes the way Bhante Sujato translates it is different. And then maybe Sankara is either a formation.
Yep, Sankara. It's
be a
formation. I like formation.
And then the Vachi Sankara, you directing, actually the directing of the mind being a verbal formation. Because it is the action of the mind. It is like, whoops, I've fallen off. So there's you can actually say, like say something to yourself to bring the mind back. Oh, I've strayed up back. You can give yourself little cues, but there's also that kind of motion of the mind that comes with the verbal formation that becomes not words anymore.
Right. But it still has that leaning.
But you can see the opposite, where the volition of the verbal formation becomes speech.
Yes.
So it can go in either direction. So if you're continuously like using a word to bring your mind back to the breath or whatever, or using words from metta bhavana, and so then that feeling tone is coming up in regards to that. So that you can see how they interrelate. It can become. I don't want to say non-verbal because it's a verbal formation, but non-language. Without words.
Without words. There we go.
Wordless. It becomes wordless. Anyway, so it's a verbal formation. Yeah, in the mind.
In the minds.
So so we think, and then what we think, but if we notice that moment before we even thoughts form in our minds,
there's this.
That's what can be used as the vichara, or not the vichara,
vitaka.
The vitaka.
It will come to vitaka for sure.
That can become the vitaka in the meditation. So the mind moving towards the object.
Yeah, that's the wholesome use. And I think we're going to come up on that word pretty soon here.
The vitaka.
The vitaka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's in that.
Yep. Coming up soon.
Yeah.
One bhikkhu likes to translate this Vachi Sankara as communications. And then he says, and who do you communicate with the most? Yourself. So could use that. It's a little loose for me, but I think it also brings in something important. Okay, so placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes, and perception and feeling are mental processes. But why is breathing a physical process? Oh, that's where we were. Breathing is physical. It's tied up with the body. That's why breathing is a physical process. First, you place your mind and keep it connected, then you break into speech. That's why placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes. Perception and feeling are mental. They're tied up with the mind. That's why perception and feeling are mental processes. And this is another one that people are like, but I perceive it here. When I tap on my arm, I perceive. No, actually, it's the mind. So there is skin. There is something contacting the skin, but the consciousness of that is where the perception is actually taking place. And the same for the feeling. But how does someone attain the cessation of perception and feeling? You can see like he's grabbing onto the most salient item, like he grabbed the Eightfold Path and then dug deeper. He grabbed samadhi and then dug deeper. And now he's grabbing perception and feeling and digging deeper. how does someone attain the cessation of perception and feeling? And so this is asking about that stilling of the mental processes. I already talked about the senses here. Avuso, a mendicant who is entering such an attainment does not think, I will enter the cessation of perception and feeling, or I am entering the cessation of perception and feeling, or I have entered the cessation of perception and feeling. That last one sounds really absurd. Rather, their mind has been previously developed, so conditioned, so as to lead to such a state. And I just put in the comment to make it really clear that the development is that satipatthana practice in the Eightfold Path. So I think Bhante Sujato might have had a note in there about it being the Eightfold Path, but I also really, especially after this last month of exploration, not thinking of satipatthana simply as doing the exercises within, so the mindfulness of the body's got some breathing and some skeletons and, this kind of thing. The mind's got, anger or freedom from it. And, so not just picking those things, but this continual awareness and sense of what is it to be in this experience right now. And we can look at those characteristics of body and feeling and mental, and then the dhammas, the realities. So, and the Eightfold Path can really help us to see that. But IA, which process ceases first for a mendicant who is entering the cessation of perception and feeling? Physical, verbal, or mental? Avuso, the verbal process ceases first, then physical, then mental. But IA, how does someone emerge from the cessation of perception and feeling? A mendicant who is emerging from such an attainment does not think, I will emerge, or I am emerging, or I have emerged from the cessation of perception and feeling. Rather, their mind has been previously developed so as to lead to such a state. So there's the going in and the coming out are because of the conditioning, particularly if you're in, this is not an attainment I have, it's just not cessation of perception and feeling. So I'm definitely speaking to you from reading about this and listening to others. But my understanding from what I've read and heard is that when you're in that state, it is just release. It is relief. There is nothing going on. It's just this real joy and resting in it. So I put a chart here because he asks then what emerges first? And the answer is the mental emerges first, then physical, then verbal. So you can see the falling off. You have all the verbal falls away. And then oops, I have a typo here. This should be physical. Check, I'll fix that later. Then the physical falls away, and then the mental falls away, and you're in this cessation. And then when you emerge, the mental comes back first, and then the physical, and then the verbal.
This is kind of interesting with what my understanding of the jhana practice, and probably people have experienced this prior to jhana, where first the mind settles, so all that verbal chatter has settled down and quieted down, and then your experience of the body starts fading more. So it's almost the same, it sounds like the same pattern, only it's much deeper.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of depth of this, and our meditation, you can experience this even prior to jhana, where the mind is coming to quietude, and your experience of the body becomes less and less.
Yeah.
And then it's more of awareness is taking over your aware. This is where the satipatthana is really important, because you're developing that awareness, but you're pulling away from
Mhm.
the physical senses. So this
Yeah.
is just, it's just continuing that same pattern only to a greater depth.
Yeah, and there was one teacher that I'm not sure I put how much stock I put into him, but I was listening and he was saying a lot of this you do experience in the fourth jhana. And that I totally agree with, but he kind of was almost describing as if you are in cessation of perception and feeling in the fourth jhana. And I'm not sure about, I don't know.
Well, according
yeah.
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't, this is I think only arhants, according to my understanding, this is
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
an arhat would experience.
What I've heard from teachers is you can touch into this with this conditionality. You can go into it and then come back out, and your mind is just really pure on emerging, and that really is like a nibbana state. And then there's this joy and relief that you feel. So that's the physical, and then there's the verbal of it's. This is where he was saying, having talked to people who've gone into this state, it's not, oh, I was determining to go in or come out, or it's almost like then you come out and you're like, what happened? You know, what was that?
Then you have to reviewing knowledge.
And then you review. Yeah. And only once you've reached at least anagami can you just have this ability to go back into it. So yeah, it's giving us some pointers.
But I like to think, just also say that this is a pattern that we can notice and the depth is what.
Yes. Yeah. And you can begin to taste this even before the jhanas. I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. Okay. But when a mendicant has emerged from the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling, how many kinds of contact do they experience? They experience 3 kinds of contact: emptiness, signless, and undirected contacts. And there are suttas on these as well. Definitely well beyond the scope for delving into today, but basically they're saying the contact, what you're in contact with is the emptiness of self, that there is no object and you're desireless. So it's deep ease and relief. Okay, so from that state, but when a mendicant has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, what does their mind slant, slope, and incline to? Avuso, their mind slants, slopes, and inclines to seclusion. So this is the viveka. This actually was where it was not Vitaka, but what is translated as seclusion here is viveka. But if we look at both definitions of viveka, they apply. And as I listened and read from other teachers, they will translate it one way or the other. And I think it really does mean both, that you're going to incline toward this seclusion and detachment. And it's also that you're going to incline toward true knowledge. So not a shabby place to slant, slope, and incline. Okay, but how many feelings are there? Avuso, there are 3 feelings: pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. And I'm just noting that at this point in the translation, Bhante dropped the mams, the IAs. So just because it is kind of odd, not our common speech pattern, I'm also going to just drop them. And you kind of know the characters are talking back and forth. What are these 3 feelings? Anything felt physically or mentally as pleasant or enjoyable, this is pleasant feeling. Anything felt physically or mentally as painful or unpleasant, this is painful feeling. Anything felt physically or mentally as neither pleasurable nor painful, this is neutral feeling. What is pleasant and what is painful regarding each of the 3 feelings? Pleasant feeling is pleasant when it remains. and painful when it perishes. Painful feelings, painful when it remains, and pleasant when it perishes. Neutral feeling is pleasant in the presence of knowledge and painful in the presence of ignorance. That's a nice one for us to, spend another week on.
Could we pause just for a second?
Please.
Yeah, it's interesting too that this is a physical, and I think the physical, we have to remember there's like the physical eye, the physical ear, the physical nose, the physical tongue. So it's not just talking about physical touch.
Oh, yeah.
And I think somebody came here and they were very confused about that. And they thought, wait, and it only had to do with bodily experience, with the
tactile, kinesthetic of
tactile, but the body, it's the eye, also the physical eye, the physical ear, the physical nose. So just to avoid that confusion.
Thank you. Yeah, it's our five senses that we talk about in general world. And then that sixth sense of the mind is added for the kinds of pain and pleasure and neutrality you can experience. And particularly there, you're going to get at the presence of knowledge or the presence of ignorance.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Sure, please.
And please, anything more. We like I said, we're just going to go as far as we get in the sutta today. We'll see. Not a lot left. What underlying tendencies underlie each of the three feelings? I think you could guess. The underlying tendency for greed underlies pleasant feelings. I want. The underlying tendency for repulsion underlies painful feelings. I don't want. The underlying tendency for ignorance underlies neutral feelings. Do these?
Yeah, this is very important. If you want to take notes, this is very important.
Agreed.
Anyway.
Agreed. Yeah. These underlying tendencies are the key, our breakthrough place when we really, really study and get to know and let go. Do these underlying tendencies always underlie these feelings? And this is the key. No, they do not. So it's not that we're doomed for all time to have greed and dislike and ignorance, because the Arahant still has Vedana feeling, but they don't have those underlying tendencies anymore. So great question here. What should be given up in regards to each of these feelings? It's kind of straightforward. What should be given up? You give up greed, repulsion, and ignorance. And then what you'll be left with is just the feeling tone itself. And then he asks, should these underlying tendencies be given up regarding all instances of these feelings? No, not in all instances. Take a mendicant who, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption, jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion while placing the mind and keeping it connected. With this, they give up greed. And the underlying tendency to greed does not lie within that. So while they're in that state, the greed is not present. And take a mendicant who reflects, oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? Nursing such a longing for the supreme liberations gives rise to sadness due to longing. With this, they give up repulsion. And the underlying tendency to repulsion does not lie within that. So here we've got the sadness of it's kind of the looking at samsara and when will I achieve what the noble ones have achieved?
So they have the pleasant feeling of the jhana, and there's no underlying greed. and they have the unpleasant feeling of the longing,
Mhm.
and there's no repulsion. The patika is not there.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not a, so these are,
It's not unbalancing.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, what it is, yeah, so it's not greed or aversion, that's but it is motivation, the longing, it's motivation, and
That's a good word for it.
and the bliss of the jhanas are nourishing rather than I need more, I need more, I need
Yeah.
more.
Gimme, gimme, gimme.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the third one. Take a mendicant who, giving up pleasure and pain and ending former happiness and sadness, enters and remains in the fourth absorption without pleasure or pain, with pure equanimity and mindfulness. With this, they give up ignorance, and the underlying tendency to ignorance does not lie within that.
So that's neither pleasant or unpleasant, but it's not defiled.
It's not defiled. And it, yeah, I would describe it as that's the clear, bright mind. The brightness comes because there's, and the clarity because the defilement is not present. The ignorance is not clouding up.
Yeah, so it's the equanimity with mindfulness.
Equanimity with mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to smile when you're talking about the Dharma.
You don't have to repress your smile.
I'm not going to repress my smile. Great. It's pleasant. Speaking of, but what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Okay. And before I get into this little string here, what's being translated as counterpart, at first I was a little bit confused. So the word is not necessarily meaning the opposite. It's something that's connected with, and it might be something that leads to. And at first I heard someone say, well, the first ones are opposites. No, I think it's saying that when you have pleasant feelings, the counterpart it is painful feelings. And, we talked about when is it pleasant? It's pleasant while it lasts. And when it goes away, it's painful. So that's my interpretation on this. Take it as one bhikkhuni's interpretation, not necessarily. So please play with it yourself and listen to others. What is the counterpart of pleasant feelings? Painful feelings. What is the counterpart of painful feelings? Pleasant feelings. The counterpart of neutral feelings? Ignorance. Counterpart of ignorance? Knowledge. Counterpart of knowledge? Freedom. And what is the counterpart of freedom? Extinguishes. And I'm going to put the word back in here. Nibbana. And what is the counterpart of Nibbana? Your question goes too far, Visākha. You couldn't figure out the limit of the questions. For extinguishment is the culmination, destination, and end of the spiritual life. If you wish to go to the Buddha and ask him this, go to the Buddha and ask him this question. You should remember it in line with his answer. So then the layman Visākha approved and agreed with what the bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā said. He got up from his seat, bowed, and respectfully circled her, keeping her on his right. Then he went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and informed the Buddha of all they had discussed. When he had spoken, the Buddha said to him, "The bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā is astute, Visākha. She has great wisdom. If you came to me and asked this question, I would answer it exactly the same way as the bhikkhunī Dhammadinnā. That is what it means, and that's how you should remember it." That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the layman Visākha approved what the Buddha said. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Oh, what occurred to me, the whole thing with the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and the counterparts. It's a kind of these play on words where it's both.
Yep.
It's both opposite, and then also because it went kind of from opposite to the how it's developed, where it's leading, rather than one or the other. So
And when you look at the Pali word, the translations of it have both. And so
It's both,
it's
yeah.
both. And so Bhante just picked one word to use throughout. I think it would have been a little awkward if he,
Yeah, because then because they're using the same word and then the meaning changes.
yeah,
But in English it wouldn't work the same way.
right.
Let's see,
Right.
there's
Time? What?
no.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, example.
Ajahn Chah, I heard this, was talking about which side looks more pleasant than the other.
Here.
Here's a bigger one. Okay. See, maybe this is pleasure and this is pain, right? So you see the pleasure there and you grab the pleasure,
Oh.
but you're picking up the painful at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a better illustration.
So we're at the time, but happy to leave the recording on a little bit if there's anything you want to ask on the recording. Otherwise, we'll also do the Arahang and have our after discussion if you wish. So is there anything that you would like to comment, or I also have anything further you'd like to add?
I kind of jumped the gun and added to it.
Excellent. Sadhu.
So no questions?
Okay, well, let's Arahang and praise of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha.
Certainly. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, IA, for your wonderful, all your research and all you put into putting the sutta study together.
And we'll include that doc or blog or something in the
What is a link?
YouTube. Yeah,
Oh,
in the YouTube links.
Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.
Turning the recording part off.